Good Wednesday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for November the 29th. Today, we're reading together in Ezra chapter 2. We're going to read about those who are returning from the captivity in Babylon and under the rule of King Cyrus of Persia. We'll read the text together and then divide up how this list is itself organized and have a few thoughts about this text. Thanks so much for taking some time to read along with me on this Wednesday. Let me get that text up on the screen for us. Maybe this will be actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think there's actually a, oh, maybe not. I was thinking there might be another list in the book of Nehemiah, but I don't think there is. So this might actually, oh, no, there it is. I knew it. Chapter 7 of Nehemiah also has a list of names. I think that might be the final list of names for this year's reading. But we got knock one down, hopefully only one to go here in the next few weeks. So let's read together here. Ezra chapter 2, verse number 1 tells us that these are the people of the province who came from those captive exiles King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had deported to Babylon. They returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to their own town. They came with Zerubbabel, Jeshua, Nehemiah, Sariah, Realiah, Mordecai, Bilshan, Mispar, Bigva, Rehum, and Baana. The number of those Israelite men included Parosh's descendants, 2,172, Shephatiah's descendants, 372, Ara's descendants, 775, Pahath Moab's descendants, Jeshua's descendants, and Joab's descendants, 2,812, Elam's descendants, 1,254, Zatu's descendants, 945, Zakai's descendants, 760, Bani's descendants, 642, Bebai's descendants, 623, Azgad's descendants, 1,222, Adonikam's descendants, 666, Bigvah's descendants, 2,056, Adin's descendants, 454, Atur's descendants of Hezekiah, 98, Bezah's descendants, 323, Jorah's descendants, 112, Hashum's descendants, 223, Gibar's descendants, 95, Bethlehem's people, 123, Netophah's men, 56, Anathos men, 128, Azmavath's men or people, 42, Kiriatharim, Chephirah and Beeros people, 743, Ramah's and Geba's people, 612, Michma's men, 122, Bethel's and Ai's men, 223, Nebo's people, 52, Magbish's people, 156, and other Elam's people, 1,254, Harim's people, 320, Lod's, Hadid's, and Ono's people, 725, Jericho's people, 345, Sena'a's people, 3,630. And then we shift to the next group of people. The priest included Jediah's descendants of the house of Jeshua, 973. Emer's descendants, 1,052. Pashur's descendants, 1,247. And Harim's descendants, 1,017. The Levites included Jeshua's and Kadmiel's descendants from Hodaviah's descendants, 74. The singers included Asaph's descendants, 128. The gatekeeper's descendants included Shallum's descendants, Atur's descendants, Talmon's descendants, Akub's descendants, Hatita's descendants, and Shobai's descendants, in all 123. The temple servants included Zihah's descendants, Hasupha's descendants, Tab'aos descendants, Keros's descendants, Siahah's descendants, Padon's descendants, Lebanon's descendants, Hagabah's descendants, Akub's descendants, Hagab's descendants, Shammai's descendants, Hanan's descendants, Gidel's descendants, Kahah's descendants, Reiah's descendants, Rezin's descendants, Nekodah's descendants, Gazam's descendants, Uzzah's descendants, Paseah's descendants, Besai's descendants, Asnah's descendants, Meuim's descendants, Nephusim's descendants, Bakbuk's descendants, Hakufa's descendants, Hur's descendants, Bazlu's descendants, Mehira's descendants, Harsha's descendants, Barco's descendants, Sisera's descendants, Timah's descendants, Neziah's descendants, and Hatifa's descendants. The descendants of Solomon's servants included Sotai's descendants, Hasophereth's descendants, Haruda's descendants, Ja'alah's descendants, Darkon's descendants, Gidel's descendants, Shephatiah's descendants, Hatil's descendants, Pokereth Hazabaim's descendants, and Ami's descendants, all the temple servants and the descendants of Solomon's servants, 392. The following are those who came from Tel Malah, Tel Harsha, Cherub, Adan, and Emer, but were unable to prove that their ancestral families, were unable to prove that their ancestral families in the lineage were Israelites. Delaiah's descendants, Tobiah's descendants, and Nekoda's descendants, 652. And from the descendants of the priest of Hobiah, the descendants of Hakoz, the descendants of Barzillai, who had taken a wife from the daughter of Barzillai, the Gileadites, and who bore their name. These searched for their entries in genealogical records, but they could not be found, so they were disqualified from the priesthood. The governor ordered them not to eat the most holy things until there was a priest who can consult the Urim and the Thummim. The whole combined assembly numbered numbered 42,360, not including their 7,337 male and female servants and their 2,000 male and female singers. They had 736 horses, 245 mules, 435 camels, and 6,720 donkeys. They arrived at Yahweh's house in Jerusalem. Some of the family heads gave freewill offerings. After they arrived at Yahweh's house in Jerusalem, some of the family heads gave freewill offerings for the house of God in order to have it rebuilt on its original site, based on what they could give. They gave 61,000 gold coins, 6,250 pounds of silver, and 100 priestly garments to the treasury for the project. The priests, Levites, singers, gatekeepers, temple servants, and some of the people settled in their own towns, and the rest of Israel settled in their towns. And that is the reading of Ezra chapter 2. Ezra chapter 2 begins with the reminder that Israel is in exile in Babylon because of Nebuchadnezzar. And of course, one of the things that was impressed upon me in a particular video I was watching on Ezra and Nehemiah is the fact that if you don't know the history of Israel up until this point, then you're really not going to understand the events that are taking place in these two texts, which were originally one text together on a single scroll. Good for us that we've been reading through the history text of the Old Testament, so we are familiar with the history that precedes the writings of this text. So we know that they're in exile because of their sin. And yet, as we noticed yesterday in Jeremiah 25 and Jeremiah chapter 29, that God made a promise that he would bring his people back after their time of punishment was concluded. So here we have those who are returning to Jerusalem in Judah, each to his own town. Their leaders, Zerubbabel, Jeshua, Nehemiah, Sariah, Realiah, Mordecai, Bilshan, Mishpar, Bigvai, Rehum, and Baana. Now, there's a couple of names in here that are probably familiar to us. Zerubbabel, obviously, is going to be someone who is extremely important moving forward. But then we also have the names Nehemiah and Mordecai, but these are probably not the most well-known men that we know those names by. Mordecai from the story of Esther, and then Nehemiah, who's going to come later on and do a lot of work in rebuilding the city wall, I believe it is. I believe that's his focus from our discussion yesterday. Yeah, he's going to focus on the city walls. This is not that Nehemiah. But these are the leaders. These are the leaders of the return, the restoration project. Jeshua or Yeshua or Joshua that's another variation of that particular name. He's the high priest at this time, and we'll see him later on, I believe. So we're reading through this text. We're looking at verses 3 through 35, and to begin with, we have just the normal people, just the laity. You might refer to it as, using some modern church terms. The laity, these are just the normal folks. These are the folks from the various tribes who are coming back. And notice there's a very strong distinction between the laity and the Levites and the priest, that you have the laity discussed in verses 3 through 35. And then in chapter 36, the priests are included. And these are those who are dedicated to the service of the temple. That's who's mentioned in the rest of the text. In these descendants who are returning, they all have something to do with the temple. So the priests obviously have work to do in the temple. The Levites have various things to do in the temple. The singers, the gatekeepers, they are all those who are going to be present and working within the temple in various capacities. But then there's also the temple servants. These are the labor assistants. Oftentimes, they are typically foreigners found within Israel and doing various laborious tasks for those who work within the temple. These would be those who have the lowest status of those who are mentioned here within the text. The descendants of Solomon's servants are also mentioned here. And then we get to verse 59, and we have people without credentials, people who cannot prove their genealogical lineage. That might be redundant, actually, saying that. They can't prove their genealogy. They can't prove that they're actually of Israel. It's possible that these are those who might have married into Israel. They might be proselytes to Israel, but nevertheless, they could not prove that this was the case, but they still wanted to go and to be a part of the restoration of Israel. So maybe they're those who are going to be doing stuff in the future to assimilate themselves into Israel. Now, even more important than these that are just not able to prove whether they're Israelites or not, they're of Jewish lineage, are those who cannot prove whether or not they are descendants of the priest. Remember what happened last time somebody tried to do something that was not a true priest? I think about Korah's rebellion, who wanted to step up and usurp the role of the true priest at that time. That did not end very well. And certainly the people are cognizant of that and recognize that these people who cannot prove their priestly lineage, they need to hold off before they start performing any of these works of the priest, so as to not incur the wrath of Yahweh for someone who is not a priest performing priestly type works. The governor, I would say probably more than likely Zerubbabel, he orders them not to eat in the holy things, the most holy things, until until there was a priest who could consult the Urim and the Thummim. Remember, these are kind of mysterious stones that were a part of the priestly ephods that they were used to figure out Yahweh's will. They were used in some sort of way to be able to determine the will of Yahweh. So they're going to wait until they can find these two stones. Then the priest can investigate Yahweh's will in this, and then they'll go about that. So this is a good sign, I would say. It's a good sign that they're not very quick to just fly by the seat of their pants and include people that they're not positive about. They want to make sure they're doing this the right way, and they should be commended for sowing their role and not allowing these people who might not be Levites to get involved in the Levitical things. They might not be priests and get involved in the priestly things, because that could lead to, the kind of trouble that got them in this place to begin with, in exile. Well, once they finally arrive in Jerusalem at the place where Yahweh's house was, where the temple was, the text tells us some of the family heads gave free will offerings for the temple in order to have it rebuilt on its original site. So the focus very much in the first 7 chapters with Zerubbabel is on the restoration of the temple. And they gave a tremendous amount, 61,000 gold coins, over 6,000 pounds of silver, priestly garments. All this was given to the treasury for the project. They know that this is what is necessary, because again, while they're in Egypt, they don't have this connection point to Yahweh. They are still Yahweh's people, though in exile, yet they want to have this place that the temple was purposed for, to be the connection point between them and their God, to be able to be involved in, as we're going to read in tomorrow's text, the sacrifices being restored. We might actually be reading double text tomorrow. Nope, just one. We'll be reading about the sacrifices being restored, the temple foundation being completed. There's just a lot of really important things that are going to be taking place here in the next few chapters. But remember, we talked about how there is a common cycle for these 3 sections of Ezra and Nehemiah that you have in Zerubbabel's portion 1 through 7. You have the fact that they're sent back by a king, then they run into opposition, and then there's a weird kind of ending to that particular section. Here in chapter 4, but we're going to get to in a couple of days, we're going to see the opposition that they had to rebuilding the temple. So though they're going to get off to a good start in our read tomorrow in chapter 3, it's not exactly going to be easy. There are going to be some people who oppose them, and we're going to see how they respond to that opposition. If you have any questions about the text here in Ezra chapter 2, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. And I appreciate you taking some time to read along with me today. I'm excited for our Bible classes tonight, especially as we continue looking at our study of questions about Israel and eschatology. We've been looking at premillennialism. We'll look tonight some at amillennialism and postmillennialism in order to come to a better grasp of what exactly, as best we can at least, what is involved in these particular understandings of end times scenarios and such. So looking forward to seeing you then. Hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday, and we'll see you again tomorrow as we read together from Ezra chapter 3. Take care, and God bless.